Hi, I'm John Galliano, Senior Director of BioPharmCatalyst.
Hello, I'm Sheff, known as Sheff Station, a 20-year vet in trading biotech stocks.
And this is Biotech Bulls Breakthroughs. Just a reminder that we are not a registered investment advisory firm, and the views on this podcast are not intended to be financial advice. Invest at your own risk. All right, everyone. Well, today is April 29th, 2025. We're really excited to be hosting our first episode of Biotech Bulls Breakthroughs. As I mentioned in the intro, I'm the Senior Director of BioPharmCatalyst, and I'm super excited to be joined by Sheff from Sheff Station. Sheff, I know that we've had you on for several webinars in the past, but we're really excited to have you on for this formal partnership and to be doing these monthly podcasts with you on a regular basis. So thanks so much for the partnership on this, and welcome to the first episode.
Yeah, I'm really excited just to dig into the trends, what's happening in biotech, and the opportunities. And I think that's where we talk about, the bull portion of biotechs, because it's definitely an ever-changing landscape we're seeing.
Absolutely, especially these days. There's so much to talk about, and we'll be getting into a lot of that in today's episode. But given that this is the first episode that we've ever had on this, I did want to just kind of give everyone an idea of what it is that we're looking to accomplish with this. So the main goal of the podcast is to provide investors with a sense of what's going on in the biotech markets, but more importantly, to discuss in detail what this means for individual investors. What does the volatility mean? What does this all mean when it comes to from an investing perspective, and also to just kind of throw out some different ideas for where to be positioned within the biotech markets. So each episode we're going to spend a little bit of time on general markets, current events. Spend about the first half of the podcast going through what's been happening in the biotech markets and how that impacts investors. And then we're going to jump into a little bit more of the upcoming catalysts that we have in the next quarter, in the next 6 months, and possibly even the next year, depending on what is on what is relevant. And we're really gonna rely heavily on you, Sheff, for that, and discuss some of what you're seeing on your watch list. So users will get access to Sheff's watch list as a part of this as well. So I just wanted to give everyone just an idea of what it is that we were looking to accomplish. I also did want to mention that Sheff posts a lot of his own ideas on his Twitter account, Sheff Station. I think he mentioned that in the introduction as well. So please feel free to give him a follow on Twitter. And more importantly, he's also heavily involved with a really important charity called the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes. And as a matter of fact, Sheff, correct me if I'm wrong, but you run a VIP-based subscription account on Twitter, or X now I should say, where all the proceeds are donated to this charity, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Absolutely. 100% of the proceeds go to Northwest Association for Blind Athletes to help provide free programs for patients for people who are blind and visually impaired and trying to get into the realm of sports and just daily activities to help with their life. And it's been a wonderful organization I've been with for many years.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really awesome. And frankly, if I'm being honest, you don't see it too much where folks are, that altruistic from a business perspective. So that's
Thank
really
you.
great. That's really great, and we're excited to support it as well. So if you are interested in donating, you can obviously subscribe to Sheff's VIP account. You can also go to biopharmcatalyst.com/podcast. And if you scroll down, you'll actually see we have a link to the donation for the charity as well. So I wanted to throw that out to everyone. But I guess, we can kind of just get right into it, Sheff, with some of what's been going on. I mean, there's been quite a bit of volatility in the markets. This has certainly been an interesting start to the year, for lack of a better word. I think, start of the year, or I guess, year to date, as of a couple weeks ago, XBI was down 25%. And, that was obviously due to the Trump administration announcing that major tariffs were coming to the pharmaceutical sector. But then, kind of right after that, the tariffs were put on pause for 90 days for most countries except for China. But it seemed like since then, Trump has kind of doubled down on that, saying that, there's going to be 25% tariffs on, pharmaceutical imports. I saw a headline saying, that could increase the costs for drug manufacturing within the U.S. To the tune of $51 billion.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to comment on at this time because we just know so little about what's actually going on and what is actually going to happen, right? And we've seen this tool leveraged by the administration in the past is like, okay, saying something, right, but then is that actually what's going to take place? I mean, what do you think? How do you think some of these firms are positioning for this? How do we think that this is going to impact the biotech market as a whole? What are you hearing, Sheff?
I'm thinking, and what I'm hearing basically is that the Trump administration really wants more of products to be made in the United States and
Yeah,
believes that too many of our prescription drugs are often made and contain ingredients from China and India.
yeah,
And if we can bring and manufacture and develop, our medicines in the United States, that we'll be better off, and that is what he wants. We saw today where Merck, just agreed to. Have a facility, $1 billion facility that they're going to be launching in Wilmington. And so they're going to do commercial production facility, and it's going to pave the way for a future U.S. home for Keytruda, which is their, $10 billion plus drug in all different types of cancers. But, it shows that Merck is definitely going to take the leadership in that and show the administration that drugs are going to continue to be developed in the United States, and that not only that, but it's going to be a center of excellence, biologic center of excellence, with this new facility, which is going to create 500 full-time new jobs, roughly 4,000 construction jobs. It's going to have a laboratory component that is expected to be fully operational by 2028. So that is right on the heels of the Trump administration on April 15th saying we don't have enough development in the United States. And if companies don't start coming back to the US, we're going to impose these tariffs. And also, the problem with that is that, the tariffs could create drug shortages.
yeah,
I mean, we've seen that the US healthcare system has grappled with periodic drug shortages for more than 2 decades.
yeah.
So it's we're going to have a very challenging issue if those tariffs, the tariff talks actually do go into effect. But I think the on again, off again has allowed the just the biotech industry as a whole to not have sequential losses in terms of the market. We've seen maybe a day or two where it's significantly been down,
Yeah.
but the pharmaceutical sector has and biotech has been really really rigid. They've been able to come back and bounce back from this talk.
Yeah, and I mean the XBI now trading at about 81. I think it was, on the day that some of this was announced, it was down to somewhere around 72-ish, and then to your point has since bounced back, making it somewhere around, I think it's like down 10% or so year to date compared to the 25% that we had seen at the low. So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree, and I think that folks are starting to kind of realize that there is a little bit more rhetoric associated with it, right? Than maybe actionability, right? And we'll see what actually takes place when it comes to some of that. I guess kind of tangentially, right? To that is there's some general uncertainty around the FDA as a whole. Okay. And so that's something that I also wanted to ask you about. I think we saw a couple weeks ago that, you know, More than 200 biotech CEOs signed a letter to the Senate addressing concerns over federal layoffs. I think I just saw, Stealth Bio had the FDA fail to respond to its marketing application for its rare disease drug combating Barr syndrome. So, is there is there any concern around some of the Doge stuff, we'll say? I know Elon Musk has said that he's dialing back on some of that and refocusing on Tesla, right? But is there any concern around kind of what's going on or what will happen with the FDA in terms of the timeliness of being able to approve some of these drugs and kind of do what it is that they're supposed to be doing?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. There was a presentation to Maria Bartiromo, I believe, on Fox, where Dr. Macari, who is the chief at the FDA, basically spoke about the fact that a lot of the layoffs that have taken place at the FDA have been more in terms of additional divisions that don't actually impact decision making from the FDA, where he thought there was a lot of overlap.
Mm-hmm.
He said that he believed that the initial hype over the loss of jobs and the terminations were due to the fact that a lot of those positions were critical in decision making. He says that's just simply not the case.
Mm.
So I thought when we saw that interview, seeing the head of the FDA talk about what was actually happening in the FDA sent the market up significantly the next day. And we've seen some consistency within the market where we're not seeing these big, highs in the XBI and the IBB and the lows. We've seen some consistency and some more predictability in terms of what the biotech market can do when the FDA is not impeded.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um,
And it gives investors confidence because again, if you know that you have decisions being brought down that are going to affect the market, then I mean we just saw an approval today. A Bayo had an application that
yep.
the FDA made their deadline of the 29th. We have yet to see the FDA on a PDUFA date significantly go over the deadline. So we have those processes in place where they still are trying to meet their mark of when a decision is due through the PDUFA, that they meet those decisions,
That they follow through. Yeah,
that they
absolutely.
follow through,
Yep.
and they have.
Yep.
Even though we've seen them late, the latest on that day, we've seen them come through with usually an approval or CRL.
Yeah, and that is great to see, right? Because I think that is one of the, particularly for, obviously we're in the business of catalysts, and PDUFA being one of the bigger catalysts that is tracked, right? There's some degree of, one of the things that is so important about PDUFAs compared to, let's say, other catalysts, right? Is that there's always been some degree of certainty around the date, right? Like, okay, on this specific date, this is going to happen. Kind of similar to what we see with like scientific conferences, right? Data. You could see, okay, data is going to be presented at AACR. The exact time and the date that the data is going to be presented. When the abstract's coming out, right? So that a lot of what we see with other data, right, is such XYZ company is going to be releasing phase 2 data in second quarter of 2025, but you don't necessarily always get that specific date, which is extremely important for investors and traders to be able to whatever, trade the biotech run up or to trade the options on whatever it is that they're looking for. So I feel like that's just extremely crucial for our business and what we do for that to continue.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting, just going off of that and talking about I was talking about that news that Merck came out with. It's also showing, just leadership that we're seeing overall in the sector. When you have a leader like Merck step up and immediately show their presence to help, the industry, I think we're going to see other companies like Lilly and Johnson and Johnson and Pfizer really start to step up and also show their leadership. Because a lot of these pharmaceutical companies, even in these times of difficulty with not knowing exactly what's going on, have a lot of cash.
Yep.
And so that cash is going to play a big part in investor sentiment. What do they do with that cash? Do we still see that even in the face of uncertainty that these companies are willing to invest in the infrastructure of the United States and what we plan to do in terms of manufacturing and marketing? Today was a huge sign, $1 billion. I mean, it's extremely strong, and I'm looking forward to seeing these other companies step up. And I think a lot of the sentiment, the negative sentiment, is going to start to move aside, because when a company starts putting their dollars back in and investing, it's showing that there's less uncertainty there. They feel that they're going to get a return on their investment, and that investment is here in the U.S.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Yeah, no, those are all great points. I guess the last piece just on just general volatility and some of what we've been seeing in the news. I did see that the CEO of Bristol Myers, and as well as several other big pharmas recently mentioned that the prospect of tariffs will not impede their business development plans, specifically as it relates to M&A, because I think there was some hesitation around the fact that this might impact the ability for merger, M&A activity to take place.
Hmm.
And it sounds like that more of them are a little bit more optimistic that really is not going. They're just going to kind of stay the course. Maybe it's because of that stop and go, that we had mentioned before. But it sounds like they're going to continue on with their business development plans. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do we still see some more room for M&A this coming year, given what's been happening in the news?
Absolutely, and especially when um, you look at other companies that might be struggling with cash. So you see opportunities for Merck, to go into different spaces, specifically, continue to create their impact within oncology. Obviously, we know that they have Keytruda, they have patents out to 2030. But what is the next step? And I think a lot of other companies, especially big companies, where they might be it might be more difficult to break in because they are bigger to some of these spaces, are going to start buying some of these small and mid cap companies and really see an opportunity for merger and acquisition there. Um, it's the way it's going. There's too many small and mid-sized and small cap companies within particular spaces where they just don't have the bandwidth to not only get these products to phase 2 and phase 3, but then once they get approved, to get them over the finish line and have them have a sales force and really start selling their products. So I think the big boys are going to really start to step in here this year. And now that we know what's going on and we're starting to see, obviously, we had a little hiccup,
Yeah.
but Bio and Pharma has continued to lead the way in terms of change and growth and innovation, and I think they're going to continue to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, we certainly echo we see that on our side. We agree with that, and I think that seems to be what's going to be happening. I think I just saw an article on Stat News, if I'm not mistaken. It was like biotech is back, so I think
Yes.
that sentiment, yeah, I think that sentiment is being felt across the industry. So that's really good.
And
Um,
listen, I got to tell you something that was really interesting.
yeah,
2 weeks ago, we were all singing the blues. I
yeah,
saw articles.
definitely,
Adam Feuerstein
yeah,
wrote an article that was one of the most depressing that I've seen for someone
yeah.
who works within the pharmaceutical industry. Like, this is terrible that they had a high ranking executive of the FDA that stepped down, and we weren't sure what was going to happen in that vacancy. And within that, we thought a lot of jobs were going to be lost and displaced because he wasn't there.
Yeah,
But we've seen a lot of recovery there over the 2 weeks, and yeah, it's amazing how sentiment can change. And
so quickly.
again, we're
Yeah,
seeing it with tariffs as well. It's on again, off again, and I think the market learns to just say we're gonna push forward. We can't we can't, maybe one time it's fooled and we start to see a significant
Yep.
downtrend,
Yep.
but two times is not. And
Yeah.
I think we've still been hearing it, and I think we've said, we're just going to continue to conduct business as usual, as today's Merck PR showed that.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's kind of a, you sort of investors as well, you in the market as well, you learn the behavior, right? It's one of those things where it's like each time that occurs, it's not going to have the same level of shock factor, right, to the market and even into to investor confidence, right? Because then it
Yeah.
starts becoming the norm, right? And then you're like, okay, well, this is kind of what we expected, and then we're just gonna stay the course until something like really significant or drastic happens, as opposed to any rhetoric that is taking place or anything that the media puts out there. So I agree. I think what we saw initially was extremism because people really didn't know what was going to be happening, and then
Right.
once you kind of see that push pull going on for long enough, it just doesn't have the same impact.
It doesn't. And one of the things um, I was really impressed with is you didn't see pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies changing their guidance
Yep.
based on what they were hearing. What
Yes.
they did do, because I think they'd heard it before, was they said, let's take a step back and just not say anything and see how it plays out. Because we didn't see any CEOs stepping up and saying business as usual. We saw kind of a pause, with the companies until, we had heard everything for the past week. And then we started saying, hey, we're going to continue to conduct business as usual. We might there might be some production that we might eliminate and some different facilities, just to make sure that we're streamlining the process, but that we're getting the max out of what we can with the dollars we have.
Yeah.
And we've pushed through. So I think, like you talked about, even with the XBI, it's like, we've really seen it, be resilient and really, see it be significantly down and then see it pop up and finish higher. And we've seen more highs, over the past few weeks than lows, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So one last topic I want to dive into before we jump over to the catalyst, the upcoming catalyst section is, just GLP-1. I mean, we talk about this often just because it is something that a lot of the folks who use BioPharmCatalyst, as well as just biotech investors in general, are staying on top of. Also because of the extreme growth that we saw in the market initially. Now we've kind of seen that taper off in recent months. I think at this point it's pretty well known a lot of these companies have not reported as strong of revenue and earnings specifically related to these drugs as of late. But I will say that there has been some interesting activity in the space lately. I noticed, or I saw that Novo announced a deal recently with telehealth companies to sell Wegovy directly to consumers for a reduced price. I think it's somewhere around $500 compared to the list price of $1,300.
Wow.
Lilly also did this, I guess, with Zepbound last year, and it was a similar thing with these telehealth companies. So that's it is kind of interesting, and this plays a little bit, I guess, back into that whole meeting that they had with Bernie Sanders, and the fact that these drugs were overpriced. So that could be playing a little bit into that, but also just making this a little bit more widely available to a wider audience
Yeah.
for folks who don't have who don't have the insurance for it, frankly. Um, but then there's also this kind of race between these two companies, Novo and Lilly, for the approval of the oral GLP-1 drug. To date, it's been mainly injectables, and I think that seems to be the area that most folks are taking a look at as a possible area for growth. I think Novo filed for approval for its candidate earlier this year, and then Lilly announced positive phase 3 results on April 17th from their candidate. So it'll be interesting to see kind of who wins. We'll say wins that race, so to speak. Especially
Yeah.
because Pfizer also, kind of officially dropped out of the race with a few weeks ago axed its oral GLP-1 drug after they had one patient who, had a potential drug-induced liver injury from during
That's
the
right.
phase 1 trial. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, what do you think here? I mean, is this kind of a topic that's kind of dying down, or do we still see? Is this are you tracking this at all? Is there
I've been watching it because there's mainly it's been really interesting to see that there's just two dominant players in the
Yeah,
market. And it also is interesting, they talk about this market, this GLP-1 market experiencing the significant growth, and it's driven by the prevalence of, not just obesity, but diabetes. So
yep,
you have two of the biggest diseases, and you have the development of all these new and effective GLP-1 medications. And like you spoke of, you know, I think that what happened was there was such an acceleration that we're seeing this plateau because, you've hit everyone that you can potentially get to with the GLP-1. So how do you market and grow this, market to where, the projections are looked at to be 100 billion by 2030? Well,
yeah,
you do two things. You work with the telehealth companies to make them affordable for people, specifically if it's dealing with obesity. And as you start to see it venture over into diabetes, we're going to start to see agents where it's not just there's a segment of people that don't want to do injections.
yeah.
We've talked about that before. They're terrified. And so if there's a way to make, them oral agents, then, you start to expand and grow there as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing smaller companies. We talked about M&A.
Yep.
There's smaller companies that are going to be, and there are players in the space. But I think we're going to see Lilly and Novo. I think we're going to see them gobble them up because I think they want to hold on to where they're at now. And when you have someone like Pfizer who drops out, and they're one of the bigger ones, then I don't think there's a lot of people behind them
Yeah.
lining up to
Mhm.
re-enter. They see how hard it is to get in the market. And again, one injury, they're out. They don't want the lawsuits associated with it,
Nope.
and they also have had put in millions just to get to where they were to have that happen. So there's a lot of risk and reward, and if the risk looks that it's higher than the reward, you're not going to put your money there. And I think Pfizer clearly showed that they're not.
Absolutely. It is just so to your point, it just is very interesting to see kind of how those two players have kind of erupted and to your point, how difficult it is. I mean, you do have some other, you do have some other kind of smaller biotechs in the space, and maybe there's, some opportunity for M&A, but I don't know. It seems like that gap is kind of getting like wider and wider from who actually is going to be able to be successful in this. And there were some folks who kind of had predicted that from the beginning. It's not necessarily overly shocking that the market had been sort of dominated by two of these kind of big behemoth pharma companies. So.
Yeah. And even if you do decide to get in at a later point, you don't have the momentum
Yeah,
to move forward. Look at what happened today when Merck, it said that they were going to invest $1 billion in the Wilmington facility. All of that was around Keytruda and
yeah,
the number of jobs and the number of it was all around their oncology pipeline. So what we're seeing is companies that are strong in an area and are known to be strong in the area that have developed relationships with research facilities and physicians and key opinion leaders are going to stay where they're strong because that's where their momentum is. I rarely see companies that like Merck that isn't in the GLP space that says, hey, we're going to buy a small to mid-sized company and we're going to try to enter. If you're not there from the beginning, it's really hard to break in because the other companies are working hard to keep you out. They're
yeah.
trying to get patents. They're trying to lock them down for long term. And we see it's a lot harder these days to break into a pharmaceutical industry sector or specific disease entity just because you think that you may have the manpower or the money.
Yeah, it's a great point. And you are definitely seeing it less and less. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see how that all plays out throughout the year. It's just always something that we like to stay on top of and make sure everyone is staying on top of as well. So, um,
Yeah, and I do want to say this. It's interesting to see that it's going to continue to grow because everyone I hear it all the time. Oh, I'm on a GLP-1. Oh, I'm on a
I
GLP.
know, yeah.
You see it very.
You do see
It
it a
seems
lot.
to be,
Like
and
I
it's
thought,
very
like at
well
first I thought it,
tolerated.
yeah, at first I thought it was going to be like
A
more of a few
fad.
and far between, but you do it's like anecdotally, like just in like our lives, you see it, you know?
Yeah. I saw a buddy of mine that I coach with, and he literally was like
Yeah,
280, and I saw him, and he's 215. He's, feeling good. He's exercising with his GLP.
yeah,
He's got
yeah,
this whole new mindset. And he said, I thought I'd be the last person, but I saw family members, and I saw, so there's a lot of stories that are more positive than, oh, I got really sick doing this. I landed in the hospital. So,
absolutely,
we're seeing high efficacy. We're seeing very high tolerability, and we're seeing this become more standard. It's just like you talked about. How do you get more people access to it? And I think the points that you covered early on in terms of telehealth
yep,
and breaking over into not just injection but oral as well are going to be the keys in the
absolutely,
GLP-1 field.
absolutely. No, that's super interesting. I appreciate those insights as well. Um, Chef, so I think what we'll do now is we can jump over to our Catalyst watch list, Catalyst watch list section, and maybe discuss some of what you're seeing in the in the Catalyst area. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that it's really key for people to know right now is that, as you spoke of earlier, there's certainties and there's uncertainties. And I think biotech investors do well with certainties. You spoke of it. When anytime there's meetings, anytime there's specific dates where you know that presentations are going to be held, there's a lot of sentiment, and usually it can be either positive or negative that goes into that. But regardless, there's certainty in that specific date. That's where, you know, you know, the field and the area that we want to play in now, especially when you have so many uncontrollables with tariffs and what's going to happen that's out of our control. The things that we do have that are in our control are these catalysts. So, one of the catalysts I want to talk about, first that I have on here is number one is IceCure Medical. Um, and they filed a de novo approval, for cryoablation therapy, ProSense. And we know that on November 7th, they had an FDA advisory committee meeting. And in that meeting, the advisory committee, decided 9 in favor of approval, 5 against in approving ProSense. And 4 of those people that were against said that they would have been for, which would have made it 13-1 if there were controls put into place.
mhm.
Okay. So we know that November 7th was that, it was that approval, by the AdCom committee. So where are we now? So we're December, January, February, March. They had said that they were going to have a decision by March. So what happened in on March 20th around there is IceCure Medical said we are still working with the FDA closely
Yep.
to come to a decision. I think the thing that was important about them saying that they were working closely with the FDA is when they had their earnings call, their CEO specifically stated that what they are working on right now with the FDA and what people wanted from that AdCom meeting was a post-marketing study. So after it's approved, do a post-marketing study to track those patients who are on the ProSense cryoablation therapy. He said that because of what had happened so far in the Trump administration, with potential layoffs, that portion had not been there. They had lost a couple of key people within that post-marketing area, so that they needed to bring other stakeholders involved, other physicians that were a part of that AdCom to come together and talk about the post-marketing. So the reason I say that is because they're working closely with the FDA. The CEO had a specific reason why a decision hadn't been made, and I think that is a catalyst that it's going to occur before the end of the second quarter. They haven't given a specific date because it's a de novo, so
Hmm.
it's in the air. But I still think that we've seen the price hold in be very steady. We've seen it around $1.10, $1.11. It got as high as $1.32 today. So I think that it's starting to trend much higher in anticipation of approval.
One,
So
one question I have for you just around, because this is interesting, because I know there's been in our webinars in the past we've talked about medical devices and we've talked about drug catalysts. I feel like the medical devices don't get maybe as much or even enough attention, or people don't really, obviously there's a lot more ambiguity around the, to your point, the dates are a little bit more difficult to track. But what is your split in terms of, we'll say medical device catalyst versus drug catalyst, and how do you think about medical, like how do you trade that, how do you actually think about med device catalysts?
So I trade them in terms of, so with PDUFA, it's usually 60 to 90 days out.
Yep.
With a medical catalyst, you want to hear, the discussions that are happening with the FDA, and usually on conference calls. The reason being is because you don't have a specific date. So the only thing that you can take
Yep.
away from those conference calls is whether those companies are in communication with the FDA.
With the
So
okay. Yep. Yep.
my concern would have been had IceCure Medical CEO had come away and said, we have not heard anything from the FDA.
Yep.
We don't know what's going to happen. I would trade that
Yep.
just because the uncertainty around that shows that the FDA, they're not in communication with the FDA, which is not a good thing. And there's no reasoning to why they're not in communication with the FDA. We don't have a fundamental reason. IceCure Medical CEO gave us 2 points. He said, we were told, obviously we're not going to make the first quarter, but two things. We know why, and that we're working diligently with the FDA and the stakeholders within the FDA from that November 7th meeting to come to a resolution of what we need for the post-marketing study. And he said at the end, and we're confident we're
Yep.
going to get across the finish line and get approval. And for a space in breast cancer and being the first therapy, I think the stock is going to do extremely well on that approval. I also think because short sellers can't sit there and play a date and try to trade around
Yeah.
a specific date,
Yeah.
bring it down, play with the price. I think no one knows. So when the price comes out, or excuse me, when the approval comes out, we're going to see, a strong. I think we're going to see a strong, appreciation price there. And we already see the demand. The sales in the U.S. have significantly increased. The sales in international market have increased. So they're constantly main features, the ProSense at these, radiation oncology meetings and a lot of these breast surgical meetings. So I'm looking forward to that. I would say watch that for approval before the second, or before the end of June, which would be the second quarter of 2025. So that's the first one.
Yep.
The second one is similar to what you talk about. It's another medical device company.
Yep.
The ticker symbol is Nancy Yellow X-ray Harry. Um, and the company said 3 weeks ago that they're nearing approval. They're nearing a decision for the Genio system for sleep apnea, and that they should have a decision in the second quarter of 2025 as the pre-marketing authorization requirements are substantially met. So they're saying the company's close, and that, as the company continues to do what they need to do, once they get it done, they're going to approve it. So that again goes to what you were talking about in terms of, do we know from the FDA where we stand? Well,
Yep.
we do. The FDA came out and told them that you are tracking right, and we think that we will get your process done before the end of the second quarter. So that is strong. The company's trading around $6 a share. The high of 52-week high is near $13. You have solid investors in the company. I think now it's just waiting to see, for that decision to happen, and it will be a positive decision, in my opinion, based on the communication with the FDA.
Yeah.
So that's the second one. I'm going to go over a few of the other PDUFA plays, and then I'm going to go to some data plays.
That sounds great.
Um, the other PDUFA play is June. It's June 4th, and this is a company that I've spoken about before. It's called PharmaTher. The PharmaTher is has their U.S. manufacturing in the United States, their manufacturing center. It's a Canadian company. Um, but the company has had three complete responses. And basically, on the third one, the company, was told by the FDA that, they had minor amendments that they needed to make to their complete response letter that was issued on November 18th. They since, resubmitted to the FDA. And on March 3rd, the FDA gave them an AAL, which is an amendment acknowledgement letter, basically saying that you have some minor issues to labeling that you paperwork that you need to send to us, but that we are giving you a PDUFA date of June 4th, so 3 months approximately from that March 3rd
Yep.
announcement, and we're giving you priority review.
Yep.
And this is for ketamine for surgical pain. So once they get the ketamine indication, it's going to unlock, the other six indications that they have looked and applied to with the FDA and that they have accelerated approval for. Rett disease and some of these others. So the PDUFA date for PharmaTher, PHRRF, is June 4th. And the stock right now it's literally I believe, one of the most inexpensive biotech stocks based on what they have. I mean, they have ketamine, and we know ketamine is used all over the world. I mean, Elon Musk talks about the fact that he uses ketamine for depression, and he says more people need to be using ketamine so they
Yep.
feel better. So the basic thing is there's no regulated means of ketamine. It's a compounded product right now, and so they would be the first company that would have approval for ketamine. And I also believe that the stock would get attention because it would be the first.
Yep.
So again, that's a June 4th PDUFA. The stock is, again, it's very under acknowledged, underappreciated, however you want to state it, for the indications that they have, and they've got a PDUFA on June 4th. The other two that I'll cover that are in June that I really like a lot are Novation Bio. They have a PDUFA date on June 23rd. The US FDA accepted and granted them priority review for their new drug application for teletrectinib for advanced ROS1 non-small cell lung cancer. And the drug works extremely well compared to the first ever ROS1, which was, for non-small lung cell cancer. It was Alcori, and that was a Pfizer product. Well, this drug just does. I mean, the response rates are significant. They're in the 80%. And the company, recently closed recent non-dilutive financings of up to 250 million, and they have an expanded access program in the U.S. that addresses the urgent needs of these patients with ROS1 non-small cell lung cancer. So that company has the PDUFA on June 23rd. It's trading around $2.20 a share. I think it's extremely undervalued because they will be the leader in, ROS1 positive non-small cell lung cancer, and that is a huge and growing area
Yep.
of non-small cell lung cancer that needs to be addressed. The final one of the PDUFAs that I'll address is Unicisive. Unicisive is ticker symbol UNCY. Um, and they have a lanthanum carbonate, um, which they submitted a new drug application for hyperphosphatemia in chronic kidney disease patients on dialysis. The PDUFA date for that is June 28th. The company has significant shareholders in the company right now. RA Capital Management, Vivo Capital, Millennium Capital. They have strong shareholders in that company. 2025, the CEOs talked about, is positioned to be a transformational year because they are closing in on this need. Approximately 75% of the people in the U.S. with chronic kidney disease, um, their hyperphosphatemia is uncontrolled because of challenges with taking 8 to 9 pills a day. This is what it's three, small pills a day, not big horse tablets or capsules. So,
Yep.
it works really well. They've had, studies on it. The stock is about 65 cents right now. The market cap should be far greater than what it is. And of course, I think it's a significant run up play into June 28th. So those are the PDUFAs I wanted to talk about. And then in terms of, just catalysts that we talk about, the other ones to look at, and you had talked about this as well, John, the medical versus the PDUFA. I see medical being similar to a PDUFA, it just doesn't have an established
Yeah.
date. But some of these other ones that do are IND plays. We're
Yeah.
seeing more companies come out and say, hey, we're going to share an IND so that we can have access to phase 3 data
Yeah.
or phase 3 clinical trial. One that I wanted to share was um, BCLI, and BCLI is around $1.05 a share. They have an IND amendment that press release that they came out with on April 10th to the FDA for their phase 3B trial of Neurone
Yeah.
in Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS.
Yep.
Um, FDA has 30 days, so they have until May 10th to act on that. But that'll open up their phase 3 clinical trial. And it's kind of one of those can't miss catalysts. I mean,
Yep.
it's not like the stock's going to share that news and it's going to go down. That usually what happens is people either trade into that or people aren't aware of the news, and then the news comes out and they're like, wow, and the stock pops. So
Right.
it's a company with a small outstanding shares. It's a small market cap, but they are in a rare disease space in Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. So BCLI. The other one is Pali, which is Palisade Biotherapeutics. That stock is trading in this, I believe, in this 70, 80 cent range. They have a phase 1B, ulcerative colitis cohort that's going to report top line data in the first half of 25. That's phase 1B data. So that'll be in June. The reason I know that'll be in June is because their phase 1A data in ulcerative colitis is set to report at the end of May 2025. So if that's a catalyst. It's a phase 1B, excuse me, it's a phase 1A cohort by the end of 2020, by the end of May, and then their phase 1B will be, they said, the first half. So obviously that's June. So those are two catalysts. Usually, typically, we don't know the date of when it's going to be, but a phase 1A is the end of May. And so these are SAD and MAD studies, which focus on the pharmacokinetics
Yeah.
of the drug, and so that's definitely one to watch in terms of Palisade Bio. Um, there's another one, OS Therapeutics, which ticker symbol OSTX. That stock's trading around $6 or $7. That they announced that the FDA had granted their request for a written response only meeting to discuss an alignment on a surrogate endpoint to support breakthrough therapy designation for their drug in preventing the recurrence of fully resected, lung metastatic carcinoma, or excuse me, osteosarcoma. So basically, by mid-June 2025, the FDA will get back to them on breakthrough designation and if their drug and how their drug can support this surrogate endpoint for breakthrough designation and accelerated approval. That would be huge
Yeah.
for this company. So they're expecting a response by the FDA in mid-June of 2025. So that's one to watch. Another one is Lipella Pharmaceuticals, ticker symbol LIPO. They are advancing their third cohort in a drug that is evaluating a rare, condition called. It's for oral lichen planus. It's like mouth sores, but and it's for folks associated with chemotherapy. But the company expects to release full phase 2A data in the second quarter of 2025, and then shortly after they're going to submit an IND. So Lipella has extremely small market cap. It's got like a couple million shares outstanding. The stock's trading under a dollar, and I really like watching that company. I don't own it. I like watching it. Just for just I own UNCY, I own NUVB, I own Pharmathere, I own BCLI, I own NYXH, and I own ICCM. Those are the ones I own. The other thing I want to talk about is in the first half of this year, so before the end of June,
Yep.
two companies in Netherton syndrome, which there's no products for Netherton syndrome, are going to have data. One is Azitra, AZTR. AZTR has an extremely small market cap. They have a market cap of 6 million. They just got into cash infusion of 20 million, where a company is going to, I forget what the company is, it's but they put 20 million they're going to invest in buying into the company Azitra. They have safety data of their first 3 patients in Netherton syndrome in the first half of 2025, and this initial safety data will come from 3 patients in a phase 1b open label trial. The company is very confident that that drug is going to show to be safe and tolerable, which will allow them to proceed to phase 2. But again, they're the second leader in the Netherton syndrome space, which is a rare orphan drug disease. The company that's the leader that's going to have data, phase 3 data, in the first half of 2025 is ticker symbol QNRX, and it's I think it's spelled Quarnix, but they have a phase 3 readout in the first half of 2025 for their Netherton syndrome drug. And as I mentioned, there's no FDA approved therapies for Netherton syndrome. That stock did a reverse split recently. They are trading at $6 and change. They have literally 500,000 shares outstanding. So if they release positive news, that stock could see
Yep.
$20 a share because there's no shares outstanding. So that's one to watch. Those are the two companies in a rare disease space
Yep.
with extremely small market caps: AZTR, QNRX. I want to go over a few more. CYBN, which is Cybin. They are in the, they're in the general anxiety disorder space. They've got data that they're expecting in the second quarter of 2025. And that's one to watch. It's an open label study. A lot of analysts are covering that one. It's $6 and change, so that's one to watch. And then Vani has data, ticker symbol VANI, has phase 1 data in the Liberate study, and that's in weight loss. So they consider themselves to be kind of like a GLP-1 kind of company that is going into the weight loss space.
Yep.
And that is a study that is going to have results. Company is expecting, they believe that those results will allow them to proceed to phase 2 and acquire some interest in terms of potential partnership and what have you there. So that's VANI. The other one I wanted to talk about is, and I've talked about before, is Tempest
Yep.
Pharma, which is TPST. I talked about that in the last call because they
Yeah.
have a drug.
I think you had mentioned that one.
Yeah, they have a drug for hepatocellular carcinoma. They are looking for a partner. They've opened up, inquisitions to speak with potential partners. The company did a reverse split, so this company before was trading in the 90 to 80 cent range. They got down to as low as 65 cents. Then they did a reverse split, so they're trading in the $6 range with a very small market cap and very small share structure. But they also are a company that is waiting to receive a partnership from a big pharma or a mid-tier pharma so that they can start their phase 3 trial, which the FDA has granted them authority to do
Mm-hmm.
in hepatocellular carcinoma. So that would be a big time opportunity for them should that happen. Um, but those right now, those are the companies that in the first half that I really really like. The other there's probably four more. Do we have enough time to just go over the ticker symbols on these?
Sure.
Okay. Um, the LQDA, so Liquidia. Um, they have a major event for the stock coming up. They've been waiting on the sidelines. They're waiting on final approval. It's a PDUFA play. I believe it's May 24th. I'm not sure though, because I don't see it here. But I know they're waiting on final approval from the FDA in May.
Yeah,
So
it looks like May 24th is correct.
is it okay? Okay, great. The next one is Ocular OCUL. Um, and they have plans to release top line data from their phase 3 um, SOL1 study, which could show superiority to Apaxili in wet age related macular degeneration.
Yeah.
So that's one that that's going to be in the fourth quarter though, but that's one that I've got my eye on. Then the final two, Sky, which SKYE. Um, they're highly focused on the next wave of weight loss therapies, including Wegovy and Zepbound. They've got first generation small molecule CB1 modulators that have shown proven activity, but they're associated with unacceptable degrees of psychiatric AEs due to blood-brain barrier penetration. But they have clinical data coming up that's going to show if they are safe or whether they are or not. And that should be in the second quarter. And then the final one is Indian Nancy Mary Boy, and that's XPro. Is going to have phase 2 results in mild Alzheimer's disease. And I know we talked about this in the last,
Yeah.
you know, in the last discussion we had. It's hard to play some of these Alzheimer's plays because so many clinical trials over the years have been negative.
Yep.
And but this one is designed, to selectively inhibit the soluble form of TNF, and the results from this placebo-controlled trial could provide the first evidence implicating inflammation as a driver of Alzheimer's disease and have profound impact on the current disease treatment paradigm. So that data is going to be in the second quarter, and those last four are just ones that the street is anticipating. Not, I don't own any of those,
Yeah.
and there aren't really solid catalyst date for those.
Well, that was awesome as usual, Sheff. Thank you so much for that. I
Thank
think,
you.
yeah, absolutely. That was great. There's clearly plenty to take a look at, and I think that everyone listening will gain quite a bit of insight from all of that. So I think that is probably all we had time for on today's podcast. But like I said, I think. This was excellent. I thought this was a great first episode. Again, I really appreciate you being on and doing this with us moving forward. So I think, like I said, we're looking forward to doing this on a monthly basis and providing recaps of the markets and kind of what you're thinking on the Catalyst, Sheff. And for everyone on the call or everyone who listened to the podcast, we really appreciate it. And we're looking
Thank
forward
you.
to doing this again next month. So stay tuned for another episode of Biotech Bulls and Breakthroughs next month. Thanks, Sheff.
Thank you. Appreciate you, John. Take care.
Have a good one.
You too.